Hello friends, and it's a sunny, rainy autumn day here, and I want to talk about a previous project of mine, the dual channel amp, and report back on it because it's now gone, and I just wanted to report on what has happened in my system. So what was going on with why it got demolished, and what I found out of some of the learnings that I had building that amp, and now having done a lot of research into how to build a better tube amp. So that's the topic of this video. So it's mostly for people that have followed my channel. I'll soon publish some new videos with new content about the Rod Coleman regulator, and also my new tube amp and some of the technologies and ideas, concepts that now went into it that has really stepped up the amp. But this is more a report on the dual channel. So the dual channel, what was it? It had a dedicated low and high frequency channel. And the crossover was about 650 Hertz. What you're looking at now is my new amp. I call it my happy amp. It's my least euphonic amp that I ever built, but it's still my happy amp, strangely enough. More on that later, but the dual channel amp. So it's no more. And it led to me doing 2 months of research into the top designers of tube amps and to see what they were doing and what they were saying about music and what music is and how you best reproduce it. Trying to duct as much and trying to gain some more powerful concepts, because the dual channel amp, while very impressive, the problem was I was never wanting to switch it on. I just didn't want to listen to it. And I could put some records on and they were very impressive, and yet I didn't want to switch it on. It was just, it broke something in the music, and so it had basically a dedicated, I thought initially that by the lows being not that defined and subtle as the highs, where our hearing is very critical, that by splitting it off, I could keep a simple two-stage design for the lows and do an all DHT for the highs, and then marry it up to an output transformer that would do each of those ranges really well. So I used a high current for the lows and a more subtle Hashimoto for the highs. And yeah, as far as the highs, it was very detailed, because also using the 801A tube, which is a toriated tube, it had smacks of details and even color and timbre in the highs. And the lows were pretty well matched, it seemed. And, quite dynamic. Not as dynamic as this amp, because I learned some new stuff about, what restrains dynamic performance in single-ended amps. But it was pretty good and pretty well matched. It seemed to match pretty well, and yet it left me completely cold. So I had great sound reproduction and I had poor music reproduction. That's what I concluded with that. And that led to me doing 2 months of research. But reflecting back on that, I just want to mention something and see what you think about this. But I thought the lows were quite undefined, and yet that amp gave me the idea that actually the lows are more important than the highs. So even though our hearing acuity in the highs is much higher, if you look at orchestral music, 90% of the energy is actually in the lows, under 500 Hertz. And not only, and of course, we need some more energy because our hearing sensitivity down in the lows is less. So you need more energy for us to have it, to make it audible. So that's one factor in that. The other, of course, is that all the highs and the overtones still, but the rhythm and all the fundamentals in the music live in this sub 500 region. So everything piggyback on that region. So for coherency from the highs to the lows, where all the melody lines and so on lay and are being made and are pegged on, if you will, I think that's why the connection, why you can't necessarily separate it so well. They need to be really well, nicely integrated and related to swing and to join and to make sense. And then the other aspect that got me a little bit thinking, I don't know if this is true, but you know, if you see why our hearing has developed, it's partly to communicate, but also partly to detect danger and to do danger localization. And that's where our hearing is the most sensitive. So I think in order to enjoy music, in some ways you don't want to trigger your survival instincts. You want to be safe. You know, like you go to cinema, you want to be safe in a cinema. You don't want to hear street noises and being distracted. So cinemas are completely isolated from the world outside, heavy in sound insulation, so that you can be immersed safely in the dark. It only works in the dark, and when you're not being distracted with other things, then the cinema experience works. And I think something similar is going on with music. So once it doesn't interfere and it plays in a region and in such a way that it doesn't engage your survival instincts, that's when we really can maximally enjoy music, and it just plays and it's pleasurable and it's playing, and a lot of the energy is just in the ranges where we're not getting activated. So a system that overdoes detail and 3D localization and so on is probably maybe even a very rational stimulus. It's not what really has the emotional movement and feel and immersion that. And it's a bit speculation on my side, and it has nothing to do with the research I did afterwards. But I think it has to do with why we love music, and when we can really can bring us in a different state. It's just when it does those, and I think the lower regions of music reproduction are key to that. Anyway, that's some theory that sort of fell out of that whole dual channel amp thing. So now I've gone back to a single channel amp. This is an all DHT amp. It has some story to it, and I will go more in the technologies and concepts that make this possible. But I'll introduce you the tube type so you know that. So it's a 4P1L. And this is with the screen as anode, so it sort of operates as a very low capacitance triode, directly heated still. And it's, by the way, it had to be there. It replaced the type 26 because this is directly coupled to the 46, which is the driver. And then this is interstage coupled to the type 50. So all directly heated. And then at the power supply side, we got two tubes here. This is the 5R4GY, and this is the rectifier for the drivers. And then we've got the 5DJ4 as the dedicated power supply circuit rectifier for the type 50. So one of the concepts in this amp was to power all the tubes optimally with low DCR power, and not with shitty dropper resistors that have like 10, 20k powering a tube that is supposed to be dynamic. So having a little bit lower, and this tube especially was a surprise, because in this position and this circuit it handily beats the 5R4GY, which I until this point really liked, but it is a much better tube in this circuit. So that's this amp, all directly heated. It's my happy amp. But that's enough about this amp. More videos with details to follow. We're now going to have a look at the speaker. What happened to that? So here is my Frankenstein speaker. I'll call it Frankenstein because it has now this weird protrusion. So it's still a 170 liter cabinet. It has a tapered quarter wave design. So there's a divider in the middle of the speaker, which prevents any standing waves as well. Makes the speaker very solid mechanically. It has two Altec, Alnico Altec drivers in there for 14s, 12 inch. And what's new about it is we got a compression driver with horn. So a new compression driver. So when I started sort of my Voice of Lancelot copies, or clones if you will, they're not real clones, they're sort of their own thing, but they're inspired by Janos's designs. This had a Electro Voice DH1A compression driver. Later it got replaced by an SB Audience 65 CDNT, which was technically a bit better, but I don't know if it was a real improvement. And now I've got a real improvement, which is the B&C DCM50. Now that is a 5-inch paper cone compression driver, and I think because of the large diaphragm size and it being a paper cone, it is tonally much more of a good match for these paper cone of fiber cone drivers from Altec. Highly efficient, yet and can go really low. If you have it on a horn, it can go as low as 300 Hertz, but I'm crossing it over quite high. So I think the crossover point is sort of between 1.5 and 3 kilohertz. So these two are not exactly at the same location. Now, why the horn? So that, and by the way, so that has been very successful, that new compression driver. I think the large diaphragm size also just helps. Horn loaded. Now this is in some ways a shitty horn. It's an Electro Voice constant directivity horn. However, it produces a lot of nasty deflections inside the horn that gives you that horn sound. Not a honky sound, but a horn sound. But luckily, if you don't listen into the horns and you don't have the direct reflection coming back from the horn, it's actually quite acceptable. It's quite good. It diminishes to say 5% of what you would hear if you listen directly into the throat of the horn. However, what this horn does is to me it couples much better to the air. So the localization of where the sound comes from and the solidness with which a tone is loose from the speaker and just in the air, in the room, in the whole room, is much better with this horn. So going forward, what will happen is that, and also the shape and the protrusion, the way the horn is set, is a little bit to just paint the whole ceiling with that sound and not hit the walls. So I found this position working the best, this orientation, which aligns with the room orientation. So the other thing I did is I completely stuffed the port in this cabinet. So it was normally mass loaded, but I completely stuffed the port and then pushed the speaker back into the horn. So what I traded is, to keep the bass balance the same, I basically traded the output from the bass reflex port with corner loading a closed, almost an aperiodic or resistively vented cabinet. And that way the bass is still good and up to a good level. However, it activates the room modes much less, and so you get a much cleaner bass, much more defined, without singular notes standing out, singular resonances standing out. So that's what I traded as well. So we got the horn loading, which sets the music in the room more, and the bass definition improved quite a lot. So yeah, so those are the changes to my speaker and my amps, and that was the story of the dual and the end of the dual channel amp. Thank you for watching. I'll go into some other things, and the Rod Coleman regulator that goes in for the Type 50. So I'll report on those things separately, and this amp. But thank you for watching this far in this video. This was just to close off the dual channel amp and just to report to you what happened and a little bit of a system update. So thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll hope to catch you in the next video. Until then, all the best. Bye bye.